Welcome to Lifemap with Dr. Matt Jensen, a podcast dedicated to empowering teens and young adults. Join us on a journey of self-discovery as we tackle overcoming obstacles and challenges while igniting your true potential and rising to the best version of yourself. Here's your host, Dr. Matt Jensen.
Hello and welcome back once again to Lifemap with Dr. Jensen, the podcast where we are on a journey through life, and we are trying to recognize and be aware of the many hazards that are in our way. But more important than that, we're trying to pick up the habits and the ways that we can enjoy the journey a little bit more along the way, because I believe the journey should be every bit as rewarding as reaching the destination ourselves. And along with the journey, I think anybody would agree that when we're on a road trip or we're booking plane tickets, there's all kinds of decisions that we need to make and behavior characteristics that go into that, which leads us in once again to the introduction of our very accomplished guest, Dr. Kurt Nelson. Check out his bio. It's on the previous episode, but he has had 25 years of experience in applying the psychology of behavior and decision-making and helping businesses and a host of other organizations that helps them to kind of guide their programs, their businesses to better results and greater goals simply by just understanding basic human behavior. And if you haven't seen the first episode that we did with Dr. Nelson, I strongly recommend you do that. He hit on so many, and believe it or not, it's like having psychology and science all together, but it's exciting. It's not boring. So I suggest you go back and you listen to that, because, man, it's fascinating. And so that leads us into the next segment that we're going to talk about over the next few minutes. And that's, what are some basic mechanisms and tools that will help not just teenagers and young adults, but any of us learn how to make better decisions, how to change the behaviors. And I'll just say one more thing, and I'll let Dr. Nelson kind of guide us into this, but there are so many challenges out there that each one of you face. And if you find yourself in a situation where you're dealing with addiction, I don't care if it's addiction to video games, that can be destructive if it's not harnessed the right way. Addiction to, of course, substance abuses, social media, and of course, many other things. You might find yourself in an abusive situation, abusive home life or relationship that you feel paralyzed. You don't know the right decisions or actions to take. I hope that you'll be able to apply some of the tools, some of the coping mechanisms that we're going to talk about, so that you can begin to take control and recognize behaviors and choices and how they can affect the road that you go down. So, Dr. Nelson, as we kind of get into it, I bet that you've had some pretty amazing, in your 25-year career, being able to apply this to businesses. And as you see the results that businesses and organizations take, it can't help but make you think about how it can apply to each one of us in all of our different situations.
Yeah, I think you bring up a really good point, in this idea that decisions are key, right? If we think about our lives are just a series of various decisions that we're making from moment to moment, period to period, and those decisions in a lot of the work that we do, we talk about those decisions can compound. In other words, it's like compounding interest. And so we can make good decisions and they compound positively, right? If I work out every day, then I get more healthy, I get more fit, and it's easier for me to work out. And so therefore and I get better at it in various different pieces. And same thing on the back end on those big things. But there's a real key piece, I think. One of the things that when we think about the decisions that we make, we often go, oh, decision to outcome, right? Or maybe even decision, and then we take some action, and then we get an outcome from that decision. And what we forget, and this is work that was done by Annie Duke. If you ever get a chance, you can listen to our podcast she's been on, but she was a world-class poker player. She won the World Poker Series multiple times, like $5 million in winnings, but then she went on and became a decision scientist. And so she has her PhD now in decision science, and
Wow.
she's fascinating. But she was talking about this aspect of luck, right? So when we make a decision, we take an action, then there's always some element of luck that's involved. And then we have an outcome, right? And oftentimes we forget that luck part. And so she talks about this in kind of the world of poker, right? You're making decisions and you can go, I have very little chance of, I have the best hand here. There's a 8% chance, that she has a very analytical mind,
Wow.
8% chance that I could lose. Well, if you play enough hands, 8% chance happens, 8% of the time. And so you know that I made the right decision, but I lost. And so instead of like making that assumption that I made a bad decision because the outcome was bad, you have to look at the process that goes into the decision making. And again, this is more of those bigger decisions as we're thinking about. And she has this great kind of component that she calls the quality outcome box, or the outcome quality box, excuse me. And basically, think about it as a 2 by 2 box, where on one side you have the decision quality, right? Bad decision quality, good decision quality, and then you have the outcome on the other axis. So you have bad outcome, good outcome. So you have a good decision and you get a good outcome, right? She calls that earned reward. Easy, right? Good decision, good outcome. That's what we're all hoping for. That's how that works. Um, but sometimes you can make the best decision in the world, and you get because of bad luck, you get a bad outcome, and that's just bad luck, right? And too often we look at those outcomes and we go, oh, I was horrible, I made a wrong decision, different things. That's not always the case. But there's also the if you look at this and you make a bad decision quality, right? And you get good luck, right? That's just, I get dumb luck. I get that. I run a red light and I don't get caught. The cop doesn't pull me over. I don't get hit. All right. That's not a smart decision, but I survived and I did it. And it doesn't mean I should do that decision again because, at some point it's going to come back to bite me. Right.
Right.
And then obviously there's also bad decision, bad results, and those are different pieces. But we as humans learn from the outcome. And what we really need to do is look at the decision quality that goes in to try to determine, right, was this, if this situation came up again, would I make the same decision because it's the best decision I could make with the information that I had in that moment? Or should I have made a different decision? And we don't often enough go back and look at our decisions to make that. We just make an automatic assumption. The outcome is the determination of how good the decision was.
Fascinating. And it's so important. I did a quick little blurb one day. I had this epiphany that goes right along with what you're saying. And I thought it was profound. And so I just thought if our young people could hear this, if you guys could hear this, it might challenge you to do something. The thought was this. I said, if you want to do something great, if you want to do something that sounds uh, like it would be a great accomplishment, but then you tell yourself, oh, geez, the chances of me doing that are like 1 in a million. I say, well, guess what? Somebody has to be that 1 in a million. So why can't it be you? Why should that hold you back from you deciding that you want that place at 1 in a million? And when we recognize that, like you said, the 8% rule, right? Not rule, but just the example you gave,
Yep, yep.
8%. Yeah, we could call it the 8% rule, but hey, 1% still, or 1 in a million still means it's done. Somebody's going to do it. Why can't it be you? And I think that's a healthy way to think about behavior and decisions.
It's there. So I will push back a little bit on that. So
Okay,
you can be delusional about that, right? You can go and
absolutely.
go 1 in a million is not easy, right? It
Right.
happens 1 in a million times. There's 999,100,000, 999,000,
I
whatever
don't.
that
Yeah.
number is, right? That doesn't mean that it isn't possible and that you shouldn't try for it. But it also means that there's a concept called base rates, right? And so one of the biases that we have is we discount base rates. And oftentimes that's to our detriment. In other words, how many times do you drive without, getting in an accident? And so therefore I don't have to wear a seatbelt. So you can do that, all those different pieces. But you know what? The consequences of not wearing a seatbelt, even though the base rates of getting in an accident are small, you should still wear your seatbelt. So you got to understand like the how often and likely something is to happen. But you don't want to be delusional about things. And so that going into it though means that all right, I should be, as I'm going in and I want to get this one in a million thing, if I want to be an NBA, superstar, I'm 56 years old. I'm 5'8". It's not going to happen, right?
Right.
I'm not going to get there,
Yeah,
but if I'm young and I play basketball and I want to get in the NBA, keep going. But all of a sudden, if you realize you're maybe not at the level of the best players even on your team if you're doing different things, you might have to come back in, and it's called Bayesian thinking theorem. It's a way of assessing the current information to reassess our initial kind of hypothesis. And so if you do that, now that doesn't mean that you automatically discount those dreams. It means, all right, I'm not the best player on my team. Maybe I need to now practice more. Maybe I need to study tape more. Maybe I need to do something to be the best player on my team. And if I'm the best player on my team, then I can get more playing time. And if I get more playing time, I'm going to get better. And then I can get, in college and play on a college team. And then I can go on from there. Right. So it's a way of looking at things and not just going, all right, I'm going to go and do this without kind of assessing where you are
absolutely.
in that place.
And I'm glad you brought that up because that's an important thing that you discuss when you do decide, hey, I'm going to go for it, whatever. Obviously, and I should be more, I should be more clarifying. We don't talk about being the one in a million to go without your seatbelt. When we're
Yes,
talking about
exactly.
things that develop you and help you grow as a person. What I wanted to say was, let's take the basketball. Let's take the basketball example here. Somebody does want to, if one of my 14-year-old listeners, his dad or mom's listening this with me, says, I love basketball. I, I don't know if it's probably never going to happen. Well, wait a minute here. First of all, it's possible if
Yeah.
you put the work in and you take one. A couple weeks ago, I had a former Navy SEAL on my show. His name's Don Mann, and he's got a fascinating story with his background. And he says in the Navy SEALs, they teach them there's the goal and the mission, but you cannot get past step one. You have to get to step one first. Then you need to get to step two. Then your mission, the accomplishment is what reminds you why you're doing step one, step two, and step three. But you have to get through the baby steps first. And where I'm going with this is, let's suppose that this young person says, I'm going to do it. And let's say they get to college, they don't make the team, and they realize, oh, I'm not that one in a million. But look what you are now. Look what
Yes.
you've accomplished since then. If you hadn't had decided, I'm going to give it a shot. And so think, obviously we should never skip over consequences from bad choices. But the goal here is, if it's something good, if it's something that's going to better you as a person and help you have a dream that you want to fulfill, start taking those baby steps, and why not be on your way to try to do something great? So thanks for your clarification,
Yeah.
because that is crucial to understand. Let's kind of shift gears just for a minute. As we're now talking about these examples, let's jump to the situation where some of my young listeners might find themselves in one of these situations that I mentioned earlier. What are some strategies for people who want to change outcomes, who might have a behavior? They might have a behavior they're trying to overcome, or in fact, I don't want to jump all over the map here. Let's suppose somebody has a behavior they want to change, in addiction, the way that they treat friends, and they know it. What are some initial steps they can take to start changing the behavior so they can get the change in their life that they want?
Yeah, this is a great question. This is also that question that if I had an easy answer to, it would be fantastic. And there is no easy answer to this question. And so I think one of the things we talked about in the last episode is just changing the environment. So that is a big piece of this. Much of our behavior is driven by heuristics, habits, and routines that are often triggered by the environment or situation that we are in. Now, that being said, you can't control the environment. Sometimes the environment is what it is. You're in school, you're not going to be able to, just change, that school easily or readily. And so you have to deal with the situation there. So the way that we can do this is there's a trigger. So typically our behavior is done. There's a trigger, and then we have an emotional as well as a rational or brain kind of thought response, and then we some action. And the big piece, and we talked about this last time, is this idea of between that trigger response there is a space. And Viktor Frankl, famous psychologist who lived through the concentration camps in World War II, and counted, as one of the best kind of ideals and outlooks on this. He talks about, between um, between the stimulus and the response, there's a space, and in that space is our opportunity to choose. And I misquoted that, but basically it's that. So if you can extend that space and in that space then get into some rational pieces. And one of the ways that you can do this is what we call an if then statement. And so if you know you're going into a situation, you're going in, you don't like how you always respond to your one friend when they say something that you think is stupid, and you just you say something stupid back, right? So you
Right.
do an if then statement. So if I go in and my friend Mike says something stupid, I will do X, right? And it's a positive thing. It's something that you want to do. If or, again, I use food oftentimes as these things that, if I go in to the kitchen and I want a snack, I will eat carrots or I will eat something healthy, right? So it's the here is the situation and here is the desired response. By doing that, what you're doing is you're limiting the amount of brain processing you have to do in the moment because you can just fall back on that heuristic. You can fall back, oh, Mike said something stupid. Oh, yeah, I'm supposed to smile and keep quiet. Okay, great. This is one of those things I can do. That it doesn't work every time. It's not the silver bullet that is going to, solve all of your issues, but it can significantly help you change those in the heat moment types of things, particularly if you know you encounter the situation over and over and over again. So that's one way. The other thing is if we often get caught up in things and again, you talked about, I get stuck I end up doing this, strolling on social media or playing video games and just losing sense of time. So all of a sudden it's like, oh, it's midnight. I didn't do my homework, right? You can add outside elements to help you with this. I had one woman I worked with one time who had a spending. She would overshop. So what did she do? She took her credit card and she put it in a bowl of water and put it in the freezer. And so if she needed to
Wow.
go shopping, she had to plan for that because
Wait.
she had to take the bowl of water or ice, which is now in there, and let it thaw out to get her credit card. Now that doesn't work today with our phones and everything else. But again, you think about those situations. So you set up so that what you're doing is like again, I said this last time, make the hard behavior or make the bad behavior hard, make the good behavior easy.
Fascinating. Now that might have opened up the thought process if and I gotta tell you, I don't have the stats in front of me, but the stats are staggering with how much not just and I'm not picking on them, I promise, but how much that mental reward, that dopamine release happens with phones, with teenagers and phones,
Yeah.
on social media and video games. So now we know why there's options for screen time, for parental controls. And if parents, I always tell kids, if parents put the locks on your phones, it's more like a punishment. But if you put the locks on your phones and you choose to do it, it's you training your own brain and building your own motivation to make a good choice.
Yeah. I love that. I love the idea of having autonomy. So one of the things in my background, most of my research is on motivation and engagement, and we know that autonomy is a powerful motivator. Um, and when I don't have autonomy, when my parents put the lock on, it is a punishment. And what do I try to do? I try to get around it,
Find
right?
a
I'm
way out of it.
motivated to actually
Absolutely.
break that, right? If I do it myself, I'm motivated to make sure that I do it. So that's a really big piece of that as we think through how we do that. So set your life up and use the tools that you have, and use the tools that are out there on the phone and various different things. One thing that, and you might have talked about this in your show before, but trying to practice mindfulness, and there's lots of apps out there that allow you to do that in various different pieces. Mindfulness has been shown that, again, it gives us just it's not gonna, again, it's not the cure all, but it allows you to most likely pause that decision and be mindful about those decisions when you're in. So again, that 2 second, 7 second thing, or that space that we talked about earlier in this episode, mindfulness is a tool that you can do and practice to help you expand that space and make sure that you're making the right decisions because you're giving yourself that time.
And to our audience, mindfulness is a fairly new term, right? And explain to our listeners what mindfulness is.
Yeah, so a lot of people correlate it with meditation, and which is partly that can be there, but mindfulness is really just being in the moment. So one of the really interesting things that you can do around mindfulness is just like make note of your senses. So what is your foot resting on? What does that feel? We don't normally think about that, right? So thinking about that, being in that moment and having all of your senses kind of being there. So when you look at something, you looked at your desk a million times, right? Look at your desk and notice something that you didn't notice before. Really focus in on the grains that are in the wood, or the colors that are there, or a painting that's on your wall. You know, make sure you understand, like, touch what, to smell something or listen to something, but being in that moment. And the more that you can be in that moment and practice, and meditation is one of those things too, where they have you focus on your breath and various different pieces of that. That is a that part we always fail. I fail, right? I mean, my mind
Sure.
starts to wander, but the more I do it, the better I am at it, and that translates into all these other things. One other really interesting piece, and I know we're jumping around here. I apologize about that,
No, this is
but
great.
breathing is another really interesting piece, and there's lots of really cool research on what we call deep inhalations. And so breathing in a really full breath through your nose, filling up your lungs all the way. And actually, you can even do what's called a second, it's inhale, like you feel like your chest is all the way out, and you can take another quick one to really expand your things. And then you do a slow exhale. And what's really interesting about that is if you're feeling stressful, doing that slows your heart rate down. Doing that releases neurotransmitters in your brain that are stress relievers. And so, doing deep breaths before you're facing a challenging or anxiety kind of living space can help you calm yourself down. I do it all the time when I have to go up and give a presentation in front of hundreds of people. I'll take and a long, long extended exhale, and it's the exhale that actually slows your heart beat down and releases those different neurotransmitters. So again, just another trick that your listeners can use. So
Trick,
three
or
to
we could say
five of
tool.
those breaths in a row. It's a tool. Yeah,
Absolutely. And you think
yeah.
about the anxiety and the issues that they're having just by taking a moment to breathe. It's funny you say that because what was that show with, oh my goodness, you're never supposed to remember things like this when you're shooting an episode. But who is the actor that played Thor? All my young listeners are just beside themselves, and I can't remember his name. Uh, oh my, how anyway, he did this 5, what was it, a 5-show series where he wanted to tune into himself and relieve stress in his life. And one of the things that he did was he practiced his breathing every single day, just like you mentioned, to slow the heart rate down and to get into
Yeah.
that mindfulness state where he got to be way more in tune with himself and his surroundings. And just had an amazing result. You're right. Our time is almost up, but I really want to get to this just last couple of minutes.
Yeah.
What do we say? How can we help young people that might find themselves in a situation where they feel helpless? They're in an abusive situation. They're dealing with an addiction. What are some coping tools?
Yeah.
Are there things that you've
Yeah.
come across? I don't know. Maybe the likeness is a business that's literally in dire straits. They're about to fall apart. How do we
Yeah,
start to deal with a situation where a young person might feel like it's hopeless? I
yeah.
there's nothing I can do to get out of this bad situation.
So I just before we do that, I Googled real quick while you were trying to figure that out. Chris
Oh,
Hemsworth is the actor's name.
Yes,
Um,
Hemsworth,
so
Hemsworth. Yes, yes, yes. Okay. Oh, I hope my
okay,
audience forgives me.
okay.
Maybe I'm not as cool as they think I
They will, they will. So
am.
here, there's a couple of so again, and if you're in a really if you're in an abusive relationship or you really have like a hard addiction, obviously seek out whatever professional help you can. That's my first
Rule
thing.
number
So if
1, I
people are
always have
there,
those resources on my
they
website.
Yep, they want to help you. They're not going to look down on you. One of the things that I think often happens is we have this society, our culture, families, whatever, have instilled in us this like it's something is wrong, and that's not the case, right? Wrong with you, and that's often not the case. There's a whole bunch of things, and so you don't have to have that negative feeling. This is you taking control of your life to make your life better, and you are the one that's in control, and so you get to choose on that. So you can go and do that. Now, again, in those situations, I go get that help, get the professional help. There is some really great research. There's this called this Harvard life study research, and I think I got the name wrong on that. It's the longest running social science research project in the world. Started in the 30s and looking at people over their lives. Harvard graduates or students from the 1930s, they followed them all the way up through until they passed away. And now they're studying their kids, along with another cohort from Boston that didn't go to Harvard and studied them. And now their kids and now their kids' kids, and they're studying all of these people. And what they found is that people who have the best lives have strong, positive social relations in their lives. And so uh, you were asking about more like overcoming some of these difficult times and difficult things and abusive relationships, addictions, all of those kind of things. And I know those are hard. And oftentimes, the abuse comes from the people that are closest to us. But there are other people who aren't participating in that you are close to, and oftentimes just connecting with them, having those conversations. And you talked about minuscule kind of things, and I talked about autonomy before. Basically, autonomy is just the sense of control that we have. And even if we feel like our life is spiraling out of control, that we aren't there, that we don't have anything, find something that you can have control of. Um, Whether it is making your bed, whether it is, doing breathing exercises in the morning or working out or doing something that you have control, even if it's minute, that sense of control can help you overcome. And one of the things that we know is that there's this element in again motivation. We talk about like we get excited to do things because we get this reward, but there's what we call the hedonic treadmill. And I'll talk about this really briefly, try to explain it in a way that makes sense and relate it back to what we're talking about here. But this idea that, um, you know what, I won this new car, it's fantastic, it's great, or I got this promotion at work and I'm getting all this more money and that's fantastic. And you're on this high, you're feeling really pumped, but that doesn't last. That kind of goes back down to kind of this level that we're at. And that's called the hedonic treadmill. In other words, that dopamine release that you get when you get the new car, you get the promotion, you get the A on your test, you do whatever it is, that feels really good. But then it doesn't last, and then you keep going. Um, the same thing though happens on the reverse. So they've done really interesting studies where people who have lost a limb, have lost a child or a loved one, or have gone through some really traumatic experience. Not saying all traumatic experiences, but many of them where, you know, it feels like I'm just stuck in the situation and there's no way I'm going to be able to crawl out. There's nothing I can do. Well, you know what? Time happens and you work through. And again, if you need help, get the help. But you go back up to that baseline as well. And so they did a really interesting study, lottery winners versus recent amputees, and they did a like satisfaction level like right after that happened. Person they interviewed the person right after they won the lottery, interviewed the person right after they lost a limb. And you can imagine the differences in life
Man, yeah.
satisfaction, how they're feeling about that, right? 2 to 3 years later, they go back, they're at the same level. I mean, life satisfaction of the amputee versus the person who won the lottery in general. I mean, and obviously there's differences in individuals, but they're about the same. So, we always look, and we talked about this social media and anxiety in different pieces. We always look outwards at others and go, they're living that perfect life. And in fact, they have their own issues, they have their own problems, and what they're presenting on social media is just that. It is a presentation, that they want people to believe. And, you go, "I wanna live that life." Well, you probably don't, right? Your life is your life, and you just get to make it the best that you can, and I think it's really important for everybody, parents, kids, whoever is listening to the show, is to understand that, when you start comparing yourself to others, and I'll use one last piece of research, and I'll use it from again, when we ask people, all right, we go, "How much are you making in your current job?" All right. Somebody will say $50,000 or $100,000, whatever that would be. And you ask, all right, what would be perfect for you to have the perfect life? How much would you need to make? Well, the people at 50 might say like 100,000, right? And the people at 100 will say 175,000 or whatever that would be. And then you follow them and they get to 100,000 and, they're like, you ask them, so you said this is going to be perfect. And then it's like, no, I need to make 175. So
It
we're always
changes.
striving and we're always, yeah, we're comparing. So the fact that there are other people that are doing better than you, just live your life in the moment, experience the awe that is around you and realize, maximize your life and don't compare it to anybody else's. So
What great concluding words that was, Dr. Nelson. That was phenomenal. And I just hope I can tie your remarks into some closing. If you're in an abusive home, if you find yourself at the throes of addiction, or if you think you're in, or if you're living in a well-to-do family, or well-to-do situation, each one of us have challenges. Now, granted, some challenges are much more devastating than others, but the common thread is, and I hope I'm saying this right, is recognize and appreciate what we can control and find joy, happiness, and satisfaction at the little victories. Because I would venture to say it's been this way in my life. The little victories can be just as rewarding, maybe more so than the big victories. So if you find yourself, to my young listeners, my young friends, if you find yourselves in a situation, it seems like every other episode I focus on something like this. Don't fear, don't give up, and find a way to have a victory today. And tomorrow, find another victory tomorrow. Even if it's just getting out of bed, even if it's just making the day, making it through your school day, maybe if it's just giving a smile to somebody that treats you not as good as you would have them. But find the little victories. That perhaps is one of the greatest motivational behavior transformations that we can go through, is recognizing what we can control and finding victories as small as they are, one at a time. Dr. Nelson, it has been a pleasure to have you. Man, we might have to do this again a year down the road after I've had experience. And by the way, I do want to give you one last moment. He's got an award-winning podcast himself. I want to give him 30 to 60 seconds because I think it's fascinating the way that he applies his trade, his science to his area of work and responsibility. So I don't want you to miss out on his podcast, but tell us a little bit about it really quick before we go.
yeah, so it's called Behavioral Grooves. My co-host Tim Houlihan and myself, we interview top researchers across the variety of different social sciences, talking about behavior, how we impact behavior, our thinking process, and all of those different pieces. based off of that, we've developed out a few guided journals for people too. So if you want to, set some goals for yourself and have a tool that can help you, it's called Brain Shift. It's out on Amazon and others. You can go out and look at that. That's a cool behaviorally science informed tool that will help you identify what your goals are, and then every day put those little small actions that you said, make those small wins in order to achieve those goals. So if you need a tool to help, that's also out there. And appreciate it. This has been fun. This is
Great. I'm glad it's
really, really
probably a
been
little bit
fun.
out of a little bit out of the lane that you're normally rolling around on, but it
It
just goes
is.
to show
It's
you how
great.
applicable what you're doing is to more than just the business and professional world. So once again, it's Behavioral Groove. We're going to put it in the show notes. We're also going to put his other social channels and other contact information website in our social channels. This is just probably a small sampling today of really what behavioral science and motivational science is all about. Remember, send me your questions. And here's the question for the episode that I can send gear if I choose your answer, whether it be on Facebook, whether it be on Instagram, YouTube. What is one change or one thing that you can do every day that will help you feel like you've gotten one more victory in your pocket through the day? Send your answers to me. I'll reveal them later on and we'll send gear your way. Otherwise, thanks for joining us and we'll see you next time.